Everyone always said, "Don't judge a book by its cover." But in that supermarket, things seemed to work differently. Augusto, the general manager, believed he was doing his best to maintain order, but he had hired someone who saw things differently. The floor manager, anxious to show his service, was always annoyed by the presence of a lady who didn't seem to fit the profile he considered ideal. Julia, at 92, was a peculiar figure. Her steps were slow, her eyes curious, but there was an unshakable dignity in her posture. She went to the supermarket almost every day. It was not only the place where she bought her small daily necessities, but also a kind of refuge. She liked to walk through the aisles, examining the labels and carefully choosing even the things she might not need. For her, it was like therapy. But there was someone who didn't see it that way. The floor manager began to watch her suspiciously. She never caused trouble, never raised her voice, and certainly never left without paying. "Why does someone like her come here every day and hardly buy anything?" he muttered to himself. He muttered to himself as he watched her slowly pass through the aisles. Little by little, Julia's presence went from something he simply noticed to something he couldn't ignore. And then, for no apparent reason, he made a decision. Julia had to go. At first, he didn't have the courage to confront her directly. After all, Augusto, the general manager, was a fair man, and he knew that he wouldn't support such an arbitrary attitude. So the floor manager began to work out a plan. He didn't know how, but he would find a way to force her out of the supermarket for good. On that particular day, Julia was especially happy. New fruit had arrived, and she was excited to see that the strawberries were fresh. She picked a box, went through the checkout, paid and left, as she always did. Little did she know that, as she left the store, her tranquil routine was about to be brutally interrupted. 2 days later, the floor manager presented his idea to Augusto with a false tone of concern. "You know that old lady who comes here every day? She behaves strangely. I think she might be stealing. Maybe we should take a closer look." Augusto frowned. He didn't like the idea of accusing someone without proof, let alone a client as loyal as Julia. But to keep the peace among the team, he agreed to check. "Just watch your words. I don't want anyone to be wronged," he warned. The floor manager, however, had other plans. He had already decided that Julia was a problem to be eliminated, and now there would be no stopping him. That morning, as Julia took her usual walk to the supermarket, she couldn't have imagined what was to come. She was about to be exposed to a public humiliation that would change everything, at least for the time being. Julia arrived at the supermarket that morning as she had done for years. Her slow, determined steps crossed the automatic glass doors, while the staff, accustomed to her presence, nodded politely. She smiled back, pleased to see familiar faces. What she didn't know was that day, the floor manager had already carefully prepared his theater. He watched her as she walked through the aisles, stopping in front of the shelves of canned goods and choosing calmly. He knew he would need an opportune moment to act. Keeping a safe distance, the manager followed her every move, pretending to be busy with other tasks. Then came the opportunity he had been waiting for. Julia stopped in an aisle to examine the prices of some products. With her small shopping list in hand, she checked what was missing. That's when the floor manager sneaked up on her. He was carrying a small bottle of expensive liquor, something Julia would never buy and which, he knew, would be difficult for her to justify. With trained speed and discretion, he placed the bottle at the bottom of her shopping bag while pretending to organize the shelf next to it. She didn't notice a thing. The manager, satisfied, adjusted his exemplary employee smile and said, in a friendly tone, "Ma'am, is there anything you need help with?" Julia looked at him, confused. It was rare for someone to offer help directly. "No, thank you, I'm just having a look," she replied politely, turning her attention back to the products. The manager shrugged and walked away, but inside he was buzzing. His plan was in motion. When Julia had finished her shopping, she put the items in her trolley and went to the checkout. She paid for everything accurately, as she always did, and started walking towards the exit. It was at this moment that the floor manager acted. He quickly approached Augusto, the general manager, with an expression of urgency. "I need to talk to you now, Mr. Augusto. It's serious. I've seen something worrying." Augusto, who was in the office organizing reports, got up in a hurry. "What's wrong? That old lady, Julia. I saw her put something in the bag without paying. I think it's a bottle of liquor, but I'm not sure. She's already leaving." Augusto hesitated for a moment. He didn't want to believe it. He had known Julia for years and knew that she was a regular customer and always correct, but the seriousness of the accusation forced him to act. "We'll deal with it now, but carefully. I don't want to embarrass her if it's a misunderstanding," said Augusto, walking quickly towards the exit, with the floor manager close behind. They intercepted Julia near the door. "Excuse me, Mrs. Julia," Augusto said in a gentle tone. "Could we take a look at your bags? We've received information that there may be something that wasn't registered at the cash desk. It shouldn't take long." Julia was stunned. Her eyes widened and her wrinkled hands clutched the shopping cart. "What? See my bags? This is absurd. I bought everything in here. Here's my receipt, if you want to see it," he said, his voice firm but tinged with indignation. Augusto took the receipt and quickly checked it. Everything seemed to be in order, but the floor manager insisted, "Even so, Mr. Augusto, we'd better check, just to make sure." Reluctantly, Augusto nodded. Julia, visibly irritated, opened her bags. That's when Augusto saw the small bottle of expensive liquor hidden among the items. He felt his blood run cold. "What's that?" Julia exclaimed, shocked. "That's not mine. I didn't even go near the liquor section. It must be some mistake." The floor manager shook his head with false disappointment. "Ma'am, we have a zero-tolerance policy for theft. I'm sorry, but we'll have to ban you from the supermarket." Julia looked incredulously at Augusto, expecting him to defend her, but Augusto, pressured by the circumstances and the company's strict policy, sighed and said, "Mrs. Julia, I'm very sorry. I really am, but I have no choice. This is an injustice," she shouted, her voice shaking with anger. "I come here every day. I've never done anything wrong. You can't treat me like this." Augusto looked away, clearly uncomfortable, but the floor manager just watched, pleased to finally be rid of what he considered a nuisance. Julia left the supermarket feeling humiliated and betrayed, but before she left completely, she turned to Augusto and declared firmly, "This isn't over, I'll be back, and you'll regret how you treated me." The floor manager laughed softly. To him, Julia was just a frail old woman, incapable of doing anything. Little did he know that this would be the biggest mistake of his life. 2 days had passed since the incident, but Julia still couldn't forget what had happened. She was in her small living room, sitting in her favorite armchair, staring at the window. Outside, people were going about their lives, but she felt as if the world had stopped for her. The supermarket was more than just a place to shop. It was part of her routine, a connection to the outside world. Being banished from that place was like being ripped away from a piece of her life. However, she wasn't the kind of woman to accept injustice with her arms crossed. Not at the age of 92, after so many battles won. She knew she had to act, but not impulsively. Julia had always been strategic, and that wouldn't change now. She picked up the phone and started making calls. First, to someone in her family. Then to a longtime friend, someone who knew people in the right places. Finally, she made one last call to someone who could help her clarify the facts with evidence. The next day, while the supermarket was running normally, Augusto tried to put the incident with Julia behind him. He knew he had made a difficult decision, but he believed he had done what was necessary. Still, a part of his conscience weighed heavily on him. He was a fair man, and something about the whole situation bothered him deeply. Meanwhile, the floor manager was overjoyed. For him, Julia's absence made the atmosphere lighter. He believed he had won, eliminating what he considered a problem for his store. But all that changed on the morning of the 5th day. Early on, just as Augusto was opening the supermarket, A police car pulled up in front of the entrance. 4 policemen got out, serious and determined. Augusto froze at the sight of them. What's going on here, he thought, feeling a chill run down his spine. The squad leader approached. Mr. Augusto? Asked the policeman, showing his badge. Yes, it's me. Is there a problem? We're here because we've received a report about an incident at your establishment. We need to investigate a few things, including the images from the security cameras, explained the policeman. Augusto blinked, confused. He knew the store had a security system, but he didn't understand why the police would be interested in something as trivial as a disagreement with an elderly customer. Is this about Mrs. Julia? He asked hesitantly. Yes. We're acting on your request. We need access to the camera system from the day she was banned, said the leader. Augusto was paralyzed. There was no way to deny the police access, so he took them to the security room where the videos were stored. Meanwhile, the floor manager, who had just arrived, saw the police and felt his heart race. He tried to act normal, but his expression showed growing nervousness. What are they doing here? He whispered to a colleague. Something about the security cameras. It seems to have something to do with Mrs. Julia, replied the employee, disinterested. The floor manager felt a chill. They can't see those images, he thought, but it was too late for any interference. In the security room, the police reviewed the recordings of that fateful day. Augusto stood next to them, watching intently. When they reached the moment when Julia was in the canned food aisle, something caught everyone's attention. There was the floor manager, pretending to reorganize the shelf while, disguised, he put the bottle of liqueur into Julia's shopping bag. My God, muttered Augusto, his voice full of shock and disbelief. He turned to the policeman. I didn't know that. That changes everything. The officers exchanged meaningful glances and shook their heads. That's exactly why we're here, Mr. Augusto. This lady should never have been charged, said the squad leader. Outside, Julia was waiting in the car, accompanied by a young policeman. Her face was serious, but there was determination in her eyes. She knew that the truth was finally coming out. Meanwhile, in the store, Augusto came out of the security room with the policeman, looking for the floor manager. When he found him, his expression was one of pure disappointment. You, in my office. Now, said Augusto in a voice that brooked no argument. The floor manager tried to argue, but Augusto cut him off. I don't want to hear anything until you see what we've just seen on camera. The manager entered the office, nervous, and was forced to watch the incriminating images. He tried to justify his actions, but it was no use. The evidence was clear, and Augusto had no other choice. You're fired, and if it's up to me, you'll never work in a supermarket in this town again. The floor manager tried to protest, but the police warned him. Any excuse could be used against him. He left the office, humiliated, while Augusto went outside to meet Julia. When Augusto saw her, his shoulders felt heavy with guilt. Mrs. Julia, I don't have the words to express how sorry I am. We made a terrible mistake, he said. Julia looked at him seriously, but after a few seconds, her expression softened. Augusto, mistakes happen. The important thing is to correct them, and I hope that never happens to anyone here again, she replied. With that, she smiled slightly and added, Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to buy my strawberries. The supermarket, which had once seemed like a routine place, was now steeped in tension. Julia, victorious, had finally exposed the truth, but her fight was not yet completely over. That day, as she re-entered through the automatic door, she was followed by looks of surprise and curiosity from the staff. For many, it was hard to believe that the elderly woman who seemed so frail was strong enough to face up to and overturn an injustice. Augusto, the general manager, accompanied Julia to the cash desk, still trying to regain the customer's trust. He looked uncomfortable, but determined to correct his mistakes. Ms. Julia, I would like you to accept a formal apology on behalf of the store. I'm ashamed of what happened, he said, his hands intertwined nervously. Julia paused for a moment, her eyes analyzing Augusto. He seemed sincere, but she wasn't the type to let things pass easily. Augusto, I don't just want an apology. I want guarantees that something like this will never happen to anyone again, regardless of age, appearance, or any other factor. You need to review how you treat people, she replied, with a firmness that left no room for argument. Augusto nodded immediately. Of course, we'll do that. I promise I'll talk to the whole team. What's more, I'd like to offer you a special customer card with exclusive discounts and benefits as a small gesture to make up for it. He hesitated, feeling that it was insufficient. Julia arched her eyebrows, visibly more interested in the structural change than in any personal benefit. That's good. But remember, I'm not here for favors. I want respect. If you do that, I'll be satisfied. Augusto quickly agreed, feeling a sense of relief when he realized that, despite everything, Julia bore no personal grudges against him. She just wanted justice. Meanwhile, in the Human Resources Department, a new floor manager was being introduced to the team. His name was Carlos, a calm and observant man with an impeccable record of working in other stores in the chain. He had been briefed on the recent incident and knew that there was a lot to rebuild in customer relations. That same day, Carlos decided to discreetly monitor the staff's interaction with customers. He noticed suspicious looks, low conversations, and a feeling of nervousness in the air whenever Julia appeared. To break the tense atmosphere, he decided to approach Julia directly as she passed through the fruit aisle. Mrs. Julia, good morning. I'm Carlos, the new floor manager. I want you to know that I'm at your disposal for anything you need, he said with a sincere smile. Julia looked at him, studying his face for a moment. I hope you treat every customer with the same respect you're showing me now, Carlos. If you do, we'll get on very well, she replied. Direct, but with a small smile on her face. Carlos laughed softly, realizing that she was a woman who wasn't easily fooled. You can count on me, ma'am. Respect and honesty are priorities for me, he assured her. Julia nodded and turned her attention to the fruit, while Carlos breathed a sigh of relief, certain that he had taken a good first step. Over the next few weeks, Julia's presence in the supermarket brought noticeable changes. The staff seemed more attentive and kinder, especially to the older customers. Carlos implemented training for the whole team, focusing on empathy and customer service. Julia's humiliation had turned into a valuable lesson for everyone. Regular customers began to notice the difference in the atmosphere, and some even commented on how much more welcoming the supermarket seemed. Julia, for her part, walked down the aisles with renewed confidence. For her, this was not just a personal victory, but proof that determination could transform unfair situations. One day, as she passed the cashier, Julia heard one of the employees mutter, "That lady is incredible. Thanks to her, things have changed around here." Julia pretended not to hear, but a discreet smile appeared on her face. She knew that, even without meaning to, she had become a kind of silent hero to many people there. Augusto, who still felt guilty about the incident, decided to take a more personal approach. One afternoon, he approached Julia while she was finishing her shopping. "Mrs. Julia, can I walk you home? I'd like to talk more about how we can improve our service," he offered. Julia, surprised, accepted the company. As they walked, Augusto opened his heart. "When I saw those images from the cameras, I realized how negligent I had been. I was too quick to judge, without thinking about the consequences. It made me rethink a lot of things, not just at work, but in my personal life," he confessed. Julia listened to him in silence, her eyes fixed straight ahead. When they reached the door of her house, she stopped and finally spoke. "Augusto, everyone makes mistakes. The important thing is what we do with them. I don't expect perfection, but I want to see that you've learned something from it. Only then will it be worth it." Augusto nodded, feeling the weight of his words. He knew he still had a lot to prove, but he was determined not to disappoint her again. Julia entered the house, closing the door quietly. She sat down in her favorite armchair and looked out of the window. The supermarket was still there, but now it looked like a different place. And, for the first time in days, she felt like she could relax.